The hope of avoiding suffering is a false hope.
Romans chapter 5, verses 3 onwards. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 9. Romans chapter 8, verse 17. 2 Corinthians chapter 1. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. These are the many scriptures in the Bible, amongst so many others, that talk about suffering, that promise Christians that they will go through suffering, and what suffering produces. It is a shame nowadays, and not even nowadays, but in the Christian community, it's very easy for us to think that simply because we are Christians, we will not go through suffering. And if we are going through suffering, then something is wrong. When I was just, how old was I? I was just 14 years old. I was diagnosed with PCOS. And after having my first period when I was 9, I stopped having my periods until I was 14 when I was diagnosed with PCOS. And I didn't have periods for a long time. Eventually, I started having them maybe once a year. And when I did have it come a bit more in the year, it was very, very painful. And I remember being part of a Christian community at the time that believed that us as Christians shouldn't go through suffering. So the encouragement that I was receiving was to pray, it will go. God will take this away. I won't have pain anymore. And when I say excruciating pain, not just like pain where I couldn't go to school, pain where I couldn't do anything. I was always told that God will take this pain away, that I just need to believe, I just need to have faith, I need to keep pressing on. God will take this pain away. And it wasn't until I took my time and actually read verses like how I mentioned in the beginning that talk about suffering, the fact that we are sharing in the sufferings that Christ endured on our behalf, the story of Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, praying to God and asking God to take away this thorn away, but God reminding him that his grace is sufficient for him. The scriptures that talk about the fact that suffering produces endurance, produces patience, and things such as that. It wasn't until I read those scriptures that I realized that, okay, hold on, actually. Is it actually a thing where us as Christians are not supposed to go through suffering? Or is God working out something here in my excruciating period pain? And I don't know if it seems like so small of an example, but it really, imagine having the worst periods every month. It really didn't allow me to do anything. And for a long time, I would be praying and having faith, like, God, are you not going to take this away? You should be taking this away. And for a long time, I wasn't able to actually live life and go through life because I was always stuck in one place, waiting for God to take something away, to take one block away before I could move forward. What the scriptures are actually showing us is the fact that God uses suffering to actually work at our faith, to actually build our faith. And I was stuck in a certain point because I was still of the belief that as a Christian, I shouldn't be going through suffering. And what this video that I'm stitching, what he talks about is he shares his same experience and reminds us that the hope of not having suffering in our life is a false hope. And actually us as Christians are promised that we will suffer. But the beauty in it, the beauty of what God is working out through our suffering, the fact that we share with Christ what Christ has gone through in our sufferings, the fact that we have not just been called to reap the beauties of what Christ has given to us through his suffering, but also reap some of the nasty stuff that he had to go through on our behalf, and the fact that we should take joy in that. It wasn't until I realized that that I was able to actually go through my periods with a bit more joy, with a bit more peace. I would be having the worst period pain of my life and tried my hardest to focus in on God and asking him to give me strength, asking him to lead me through it. And I started praying the right prayers in that. Just as Christ taught the disciples, I started to pray, let your will be done. And as I continuously prayed that prayer, I was still having terrible period pain, which meant that at that specific moment in time, that was the will of God for me. And he birthed endurance, patience, long suffering through that, which I'm still building through him in my character today. And I realized the truth is that life is full of suffering, and I can't go through life in the way that God has called us to, or called me to, if I'm sitting in the same place waiting for God to take the suffering away. And so with all of that, I just read James chapter 1, Verse 2, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And so my prayer is that we continuously have this approach towards suffering, one of joy, one of seeking the will of God in everything that we're going through, so that he may be glorified and we may be continuously built up to look like him.